What's a story your friend told which you initially thought was bullshit, but turned out to be true? I went to college in a city called Galway in the west of Ireland. One of my friends there was a native of the city. He often told me this story about a local character called Johnny Moochiman, who was stumbling home from the pub late one night, and he spotted a circus set up on the side of the road. So he hops over the wall and decides to go in for a look. He wanders over to the cage where the tigers are kept and sticks his hand through the gap wanting to pet them. The tigers immediately bit both of the man's arms off. Well, I didn't believe this story for any number of reasons. His ridiculous name, Johnny Moochiman, the fact that the tigers managed to bite his arms off in one go, the fact that the man had survived, the fact that circuses apparently still exist in this day and age. None of it remotely plausible. Couple of years later, I had just started working in a late-night petrol station/convenience store. Late one night, a drunk comes up to the locked front door trying to get in. I point him around to the hatch I'm serving through, but the security guard unlocks the door and lets him in. He tells me this is Johnny. He and the store manager are the only two people you're allowed open the front door for. This seemed odd to me, 'cause he looked like a random tramp off the street. That's when I realized the guy's sleeves were dangling. He had no arms. That night, and many other to follow that summer, I had to sell cigarettes to Johnny Moochiman. This involved taking money out of his trouser pocket and replacing the change. It also involved opening the cigarette pack, putting a cigarette in his mouth, lighting a match, and then putting the cigarette box and matches in his jacket pocket. Postscript, a few weeks later I met a friend of mine who worked as a barman in the city. We got to talking about Johnny Moochiman. Apparently, he drank a lot in the bar my friend was working in. All day in the bar drinking pints of Guinness through a straw. I was giving out, telling my friend how much I dreaded putting my hand into the Johnny Moochiman's disgusting trousers. My friend snorted, looked at the ground, and said, Ian, what do you think happens when he has to go for a piss? Story 2. My college housemate came out of his bedroom looking like he had been through the ringer early one morning after we moved into a new place. He told me he had sleepwalked, woke up to a gun in his face at 3 a.m., ran the wrong direction, and ended up almost at Mark 2. 6 miles according to Google Maps before a guy came out of his house who called his police officer brother-in-law. The police officer drove us home. Didn't believe he had made it that far, but I drove to Mart later and saw a house that was the exact description my roommate had given me. Then throughout the day, both the cop and the homeowner came to check on him. He has a history with sleepwalking, but not 2 miles story 3 had a friend that lied about pretty much everything. Talked about how he modded his PS1 to make Lara Croft naked. He claimed to have ollied 7 stairs on a skateboard while wearing boots when he was a freshman in high school. Bragged about a bunch of girls he made out with that were just absolutely out of his league. We were the awkward Star Wars nerds, and he was talking about cheerleaders. This was like the late 90s, when our obsession with those movies absolutely not in fashion. He told us he had a working Simpsons arcade cabinet in his garage. Said he had family members in the mafia because he had an Italian last name and was from Jersey. One day, he invites us over to his house to hang out for the afternoon. Cranks up the PS1, and I'm like, let's see some Lara Croft titties, sir. He says that's another PlayStation that his cousin was borrowing or something. I figured, fuck it, I can now call him out on some real bullshit he was spouting. Asked him to see the Simpsons arcade cabinet, and he took us to the garage, and that motherfucker had a working Simpsons arcade cabinet in his garage. Story 4. I worked in a lawyer's office when I finished school, 20 or so years ago now. Really bonded with this one guy who was as low in the pecking order as I was. I think he was some kind of office supply person, whereas I was just the girl that opened the mail. We'd go to the pub for lunch every day, get a nice little buzz going and just talk about random stuff, except he would always change the subject when I asked about his life before the office. He was a smart guy, really sharp and funny, and I always wanted to know how he ended up ordering post-it notes for a small-time firm of solicitors in Middle England. One lunchtime, he had a couple more beers than usual and started to tell me this story about how he hadn't always been known by the name he was using. that in actual fact he was on the run because his dad was a big-time recreational drug manufacturer, and he used to work for him as a dealer, and that one day a few years before I met him they had been raided by the police. His dad went to prison for a while, and they didn't catch my friend because he had long, flowing hair at the time, and the team that had them under surveillance thought he was a girl. I laughed it off, figured he was just saying it to impress me or something. Didn't mention it again. A couple of weeks later, we're at his place. He puts the TV on, grabs a VHS tape off the shelf, and tells me to watch. It's a recording of a report from the national news about his dad, and they show a bit of the surveillance footage of the mysterious girl who is 100% unmistakably actually my guy from work. All he did was cut his hair and get a job with a load of criminal lawyers. Talk about hiding in plain sight. Story 5, I had a high school/college friend who was normally a good AF dude, but had anger problems when he drank, call him Julius. His GF cheated on him and left him for one of his other really close friends, call him Mark. A couple weeks later, Julius was at a party. He got drunk and wandered off. Mark's car was parked a few blocks away from that party and was found vandalized and broken into. Julius swears up and down he didn't do it. I said I believed him, but was really skeptical. Just seemed like something he'd do when drunk, and it was a lot of coincidence. Police talked to him a couple of times, and Julius is in the process of lawyering up. Next weekend comes, and there are several more vandalized/burglared cars in the same neighborhood, and they caught the guy on video doing it. Definitely not Julius. I honestly couldn't believe he didn't do it, but he was telling the truth. Story 6. Basically, this story was one of those urban legends, you know, that everyone knows a friend of a friend of a friend, but you doubt it's actually true. I met the girl who had the hospital records to prove it. She had her nipple pierced for a while when one day one of the balls that screws on had accidentally unscrewed and fallen off. Stupidly, instead of just taping the piercing in and buying another ball the next day, she pulled the piercing out, and with it came a long white thing, so she cuts it, I don't know why, shits herself, vomits, blacks out, wakes up in hospital. She cut a nerve, an actual nerve. So yeah, I heard the story from a friend about her friend, didn't believe it. Met the friend, it's gross. Story 7. My big brother and his friend used to regale me with stories from their time in the military, and one of the main characters was this Paul Bunyan type, who was always the strongest/fastest/baddest of them all. Many were his feats and exploits. Later on, when I was in college, my best friend actually used to tell me the same stories from the time **** was in the military, and wouldn't you figure, they were the same stories of the same guy, only this time my friend was the star. I used to feel bad for him that he had so little self-esteem that he would pretend to be what I already knew was an urban legend, but I never let on. My friend struggled a lot with depression and went on to kill himself. The devastating weekend that I went to his home to help his mom and girlfriend pack up his stuff, I found his stash of military mementos. There in the pile was concrete evidence of every over-exaggerated adventure I had ever not believed. I had been friends with the man my brother and his comrades idolized, but had never put 2 + 2 together, and I had always referred to him by his nickname, and not the full name they knew him by, so they never guessed either. I had talked about my friend as the kindest, funniest, most generous and sensitive person I'd ever known, but also as a person plagued by insecurities and feeling he was never enough. My brother's clan had spoken of him as a fearless, hard ass who would stop at nothing to get a job done. We never realized we had the same guy. There was even an oil portrait of him commissioned by one of his senior officers, who made a habit of having paintings made of his favorite recruits. The ones he said would have portraits in the National Gallery someday. He would pay thousands of dollars for 2 original oils, so the story was told, and give one to the soldier and keep one for his Hall of Fame. The painting was in the back corner of my friend's closet, leaning with its face to the wall. It was signed on the back by the colonel, who called him a true leader. He died feeling alone and unappreciated. He was everyone's rock, but never felt he could lean on anybody. If only I had believed who he was, I know I could have had dozens of grown-ass, accomplished men by his side making him feel like a king, telling him all about how he inspired them. It was a huge lesson, is all I can say to defend myself. And since it's Ash Wednesday, I'll add that every Good Friday, when they get to the part about the Roman soldier who crashed to his knees beside the cross and cried out, surely this was the Son of God, I know the feeling. I'll never forget the looks on the faces of my brother and his best friend when I told them. How stupid we all felt at having thought ill of this man. My brother and his friend thinking he was a weakling who couldn't handle his problems, and me thinking he was inflating his own ego by talking about how great he was. Kinda like folks say about Jesus. TLDR, be careful who you underestimate. Story 8, my senior year of high school, I had moved to a new school. I played paintball for a small team at the time, so I'd hang out around the field a lot. Saw a kid from my school there with some nice gear, and he said 3 of the other kids we went to school with play as well. I'll cut the fluff straight to the details. At the time I wasn't driving, didn't have money for a car. So he offered me a ride home. He drove this decked-out Yukon at age 18. I was shocked. It's sort of a rural area, so as we are driving, he says you mind if I pull over for a top-off. I'm thinking WTF is a top-off. Maybe he needs to piss. He whips out about an 8-ball and chops a rail down and hoovers it up. That was the first time I'd seen anyone do cocaine or even seen it. Of course he got chatty as we continued to drive. That's when he asked if I wanted the rest, pretty much a full 8-ball. I declined and asked him, isn't that shit expensive, like why would you just give it to me? All he said was, my mom blows down like Scarface, trust me, I'm good. A month went by and I went back to his house after practice to smoke a little weed and chill with some of the guys from the field. He nudged me and said, remember what I told you, do you want any? I denied again and said, WTF do you mean, show me. He takes me upstairs to his mom's room, and I mean there's bricks upon bricks of cocaine. Now their house was big, like 10-0 SUFT, but I'm almost positive the amount of cocaine that was in that room was worth more than the house. Insane if his mom wouldn't have had to go on the run, and they went too. To this day I'd still think I was hallucinating off some laced weed. As a middle-class suburban dude, I had never expected to see that in my life, let alone someone's mother just having bricks laying around the house. Story 9, I was the one they thought was bullshitting. When I was in middle school, my right arm started doing this weird shaking, like it would literally vibrate 24/7, including when I slept. So I go to every doc under the sun. They do an EG, ERG, MRI, CT scan, blood work, etc. They were determined to figure out what was wrong with my arm. So tiny middle school me is poked with so many needles by the end of it that my inner elbows look like a meth head's. They're bruised and I have something like 4-6 spots from getting needles stuck in me for various tests. So I'm telling this story to all my friends in class, and a girl I don't know well turns around and tells me making things up doesn't make me cool. I kept arguing I had proof, which I did, and showed her my arm eventually. She said P50 that could be from anything. The next day, I showed up covered in wires all over my head and carrying a big battery over my shoulder. They were doing a 3-day EG. I dunno if that was enough to convince her, but she didn't try to call me a liar anymore. Oh, and the kicker, my arm stopped one day on its own. They never knew what happened to start it or why it stopped. Story 10, not my friend but my mom. She told me that my dad's dad was a 2-star general in the Korean War and was awarded a medal for being shot through the kneecap. She said the bullet went straight through. Went to my grandpa's house and noticed a few things I never noticed before. He lives in Korea and me in Kali, so I've only seen him less than 10 times in my life. On his dresser was a picture of him receiving a medal, all dressed in military clothes. He also gave my brother his army binoculars. He had a bad limp but could still walk. When we went to dinner that day, people I didn't know would bow to him. The restaurant we went to was full, but I guess they save a table just for him, and the manager or owner or something like that came out to shake his hand. He also speaks Japanese, Korean, and English, probably more, and reads books in these languages often. I really respected my grandpa after that. He's still alive to this day, but he's over 90 years old, and me and my dad both know his last day is coming soon. He is too stubborn to get a wheelchair, so he uses one of those walking things with 4 legs and tennis balls on them. Because of this, he can't leave the apartment and hasn't really seen the world for a while. I called him a few months back and told him I loved him in Korean. He gave me this old Korean man laugh that old Koreans do when they are pleased. It made me happy and tear up. I've only told my dad I love him like 3 times in my life. It was hard. I probably won't be able to see him again before he goes because of my certain situation. But I'm glad I got to see him the times I did and was able to tell him I love him over the phone. I don't know him that well, but boy, do I love him. Story 11. A good friend of mine, let's call him Steve, had a friend in high school with whom he played field hockey at the time. Let's call his friend Mike. These guys were about 14/15 years of age at the time. Mike and Steve would get hockey training from Mike's older brother. We'll call him Tom. Tom was a few years older than Mike and Steve and was clearly in the midst of his puberty. According to Steve, Tom would make all kinds of childish, sex-related puns. Most of these jokes/puns contain the word sperm or cum. The Dutch jokes don't translate well to English, so I am not gonna try either, but safe to say the guy was pretty wild about cum puns. Both Mike and Tom were pretty crazy kids, as you will see later on. Okay, so there is this holiday in the Netherlands called Sinterklaas. A common tradition during Sinterklaas is to pull straws within your family and create a self-made gift for another person of your family. People often buy small presents and decorate these presents in a manner suiting for the person that shall receive the gift. Another celebration of Sinterklaas was upon us. During this particular Sinterklaas, Mike pulled the straw. Of his brother Tom, here's where the weird shit starts. Not knowing what to get his brother as a present, Mike turned to Steve. What shall I get him? The guy really does not like anything at all. To which Steve jokingly replied, you should get him sperm, haha. That's the one thing he loves most, right? Fast forward 2 weeks, Mike approaches Steve at school. Man, my room is really starting to smell bad. Steve, what you mean, smell bad? Mike, yeah, you don't remember. When you told me to give Tom cum as a present, I've started creating my gift. All the jacking off is becoming pretty boring as well, though. This Mike guy had been collecting his cum for straight 2 weeks in a small glass container. He did not bother to put a lid on top of it. The cleaning lady at Mike's home asked him several times where that horrendous smell was coming from, since she could not locate the source herself. Fast forward to the day of Sinterklaas. Mike has been collecting his supply of semen for about 3 weeks now, and proceeds to make this even more weird than it already is. Since the presents during Sinterklaas need to look some, what fancy Mike thought he might as well pour his cum into a martini cocktail glass. Not only did he put it in a glass, he also went as far as to put one of those tiny beach umbrellas in it, and completed the edge of the glass with a layer of sugar. If that is not the most fed-up pina colada you will ever witness, I do not know what is. To further build up the tension of his gift, he put it in a simple cardboard box, so it was not visible if left unopened. That night of Sinterklaas, a few gifts had already been opened. The whole family was having a jolly good time. Mike, Tom, their sister Jenny, and both Mom and Dad were in good spirits. Then Dad proceeds to take another gift from the pile. Dad grabs the cardboard box we are all too familiar with and does not see a name written on it. Dad turns the box upside down looking for a name. It was at this moment Mike knew he fucked up. The cum flooded out of the box on the Dad's wrist. Not believing what had just happened, the Dad stood up and exclaimed, "If this is what I think he is, this party is over." Asterisk asterisk proceeds to sniff on wrist asterisk asterisk. Is this cum? The whole room is quiet and does not know what the fuck is going on. The Dad completely loses it and storms off to his room, not opening the door for the rest of the night. I hope some of y'all find this just a tiny bit as hilarious and